Welcome, learners, to another deep dive. Today, we're embarking on, well, a really fascinating and, frankly, often provocative exploration. We're drawing from a powerful message by Dr. Armando Alducin titled The Future Commercial Babylon of the Antichrist, Part 1. Our mission today is to unpack his take on biblical prophecies, specifically those about a city called Babylonia. And you might think ancient history, right? But you'll see how he connects these texts to surprisingly modern events and trends, global commerce, even the nature of truth itself.
Yeah, and what's really striking right off the bat isn't just that there's prophecy in the Bible, it's the sheer volume. I mean, the material we're looking at highlights this pretty astonishing fact. Nearly a third of the entire Bible, that's apparently 1,807 prophecies, spread across 8,350 verses. It's prophetic content.
Wow, okay. Nearly a third. That's huge.
It really is. It's not just a side note, It suggests maybe a core function of the text, not just history.
So what does our source suggest is the implication of that? Why the emphasis that we really should be paying attention now?
Well, the source argues we're approaching a point so important in human history that understanding these becomes, crucial. It brings up Jeremiah 10.23. The man is not master of his way. Basically suggesting we can't really guide ourselves without this kind of insight. It's a call to look at history from a divine perspective, according to Alducin.
Okay. Now, the source pivots to something really central. It argues the Bible kind of starts and essentially ends with this place, Babylonia. The very first city mentioned is Babel, founded by Nimrod, whose name, interestingly, means the rebel.
Right. And the source frames him as leading the first sort of global rebellion against God.
And geographically, the Bible is specific, isn't it?
Very specific. When it mentions the land of Shinar or the land of the Chaldeans, it's pointing squarely at ancient Mesopotamia, which today is basically modern Iraq and Syria. It's worth noting, too, the source mentions those current borders were largely drawn by the British and French post-1920. So biblically, Babylonia often means what's now Iraq.
And the word Babel itself means confusion.
Exactly. And the source really leans into that. It argues that this ancient idea of confusion is deeply relevant right now, globally.
How so? Where does Dr. Alducin see this confusion playing out today?
Well, he connects it to a whole range of issues. Things like debates during the pandemic where even basic biological facts felt up for grabs. He mentions discussions about gender identity in children versus genetics, confusion over public health measures, and also a perceived failure across the board in political systems, Democratic, Republican, Communist, Socialist. The source claims they've all sort of failed and collapsed.
And it's broader than just politics or biology, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. The source points to confusion in theology, philosophy, religions. It even brings in things like TikTok, just being bombarded by so many voices, it's hard to know what's true. The core idea presented is that humanity without a divine compass just gets inherently confused, like at Babel in the beginning, and the source argues, again at the end.
Okay, so this sets the stage. Now let's get into a really critical distinction the source makes. It talks about two Babylons in prophecy.
Yes, this is absolutely key to Alducin's interpretation. Both are significant for the last days, as the Bible calls them, but they are distinct entities.
Right. So let's take the first one. Religious Babylonia. That's Revelation chapter 17. What's the description there?
It's described quite graphically as a spiritual prostitute, a religious system that sort of sold itself, and the source asserts its base will be Rome.
Why Rome specifically?
Because the text says the woman is the great city that reigns over the kings of the earth. And when the Apostle John wrote Revelation, that city was undeniably Rome. The source interprets this system as one that historically mixed religion and politics for power and wealth. It cites Rome's dominance in Europe for centuries and historical events like the Inquisition as examples of this.
Okay, but the source adds a clarification here, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yes, and it's important. It stresses this isn't about condemning individual people within that system, like, say, sincere Catholics who love Jesus and read their Bible. Instead, the critique is aimed at what it calls a system corrupted to the core, a political spiritual structure. The argument is that any human government over time tends towards corruption when humans gain power.
Got it. So that's the religious Babylonia linked to Rome. Then there's the other one, commercial Babylonia.
Right, found in Revelation chapter 18. And this one, the source emphasizes, is presented as a literal, physical, visible city, a city that will rise specifically in the area of modern Iraq and Syria, that ancient land of Shinar, Mesopotamia.
And how does the source see this playing out, or signs of it today?
It points to what it sees as a major global trend towards commerce. It cites a statistic like 70% of professionals in Mexico supposedly working in commerce outside their trained field. And a similar thing in the US, where even grads struggle to find field-specific jobs. He gives a personal example, his daughter Natalia, university degree, but could only find a kindergarten job paying $2,000 a month, little prospect of raises. The point being, commerce is becoming the main way people see to get ahead globally.
Okay, and this connects to recent geopolitics.
Fascinatingly, yes. The source highlights a specific statement attributed to former President Trump after meeting the Saudi sheikh. According to the source, Trump said something like, "We are going to turn the Middle East into a paradise."
And the source sees that as prophetically significant.
It does. It views that statement, plus the potential for Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords, which already include UAE, Egypt, Jordan, Morocco. It sees these as potentially accelerating the fulfillment of prophecy.
Accelerating it how? What's the connection?
The idea presented is that if Saudi Arabia joins, it could unleash this impressive explosion of commerce and money in the Middle East. Good for the world, perhaps. But, and this is critical to the source's view, the Antichrist figure will supposedly exploit this boom and rise specifically from that Iraq-Syria region. The source also identifies this figure as Muslim, which Dr. Aldusin apparently detailed in another series.
Right, okay, so that's the connection made there. But how literally should we take these prophecies of destruction associated with Babylonia?
That's a key question the source tackles. It argues strongly against interpretations that say these prophecies, like in Isaiah 13, have already happened. Isaiah 13 was written, 2,700 years ago. It says Babylonia will be destroyed like Sodom and Gomorrah, never lived in again, filled with demonic spirits.
Which hasn't happened to Babylon, historically.
Exactly. The source argues this refers to a future time it calls the Day of the Lord, often interpreted as involving the tribulation period and the millennium, and it points to specific descriptions, like the sun and moon darkening, which obviously haven't happened yet on that scale.
And the sin that brings this judgment, the source highlights arrogance.
Yes, arrogance. And it draws a really stark parallel. It quotes someone, supposedly the director of the World Economic Forum, saying something like, "We have become gods. We're going to evolve, transform human beings into a god." Now, whether that quote is exact or not, the source uses it to illustrate this ultimate human hubris, thinking we don't need God, which, it argues, is the logical end of atheism. You become your own god, making your own rules.
Okay, moving on to another prophecy, Zechariah 5. This one seems very focused on commerce itself.
Very much so. Zechariah sees this vision, a flying ephah. An ephah was an ancient measuring container used in commerce, so it's like seeing, I don't know, a giant flying dollar sign or something today.
And in this ephah, it's called iniquity.
Yes. And the source notes the Hebrew word ayin can also mean reflection. So this flying commerce isn't just doing bad things. It reflects a kind of spiritual curse, a system prone to ruin, maybe like we see with volatile markets, crypto crashes, where fortunes vanish instantly. It connects it back to the idea that the love of money is the root of all evil.
It gets even more symbolic, though. There's a lead box.
Right, a lead box containing the ephah. Lead blocks things from view, right? So suggesting something hidden, secretive about this system. And inside, sitting on the ephah, is a woman named Risha, which means wickedness.
Wow, so wickedness sitting atop commerce, hidden in a lead box.
Pretty potent imagery. And then 2 women with stork wings carry the whole thing off.
Stork wings, that seems oddly specific.
It does. And the source points out that in Leviticus 11, the stork is actually listed as an unclean bird according to Mosaic law. So even the transport mechanism is symbolically unclean, reinforcing the corrupted nature of what's being moved.
And where do they take it?
They take it to the land of Shinar, back to Iraq, Syria, to build a house or a base for it there. So the interpretation offered is that this whole vision predicts the literal relocation of the world's dominant commercial system, maybe currently symbolized by Wall Street or London, back to the Middle East, to Iraq and Syria specifically.
Oh, that's quite a specific interpretation of that vision.
It is. It ties all these threads together, the geography of Shinar, the theme of commerce, and the idea of a future Babylonian system.
Now, connecting this to personal ethics, the source brings up James chapter 5 in the New Testament.
Yes, which contains that strong warning to the rich. Weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. But again, the source clarifies, this isn't about condemning wealth itself. It's about condemning the love of money, avarice, greed. And it suggests that actively giving, particularly to support religious work or God's work, is presented as an antidote to falling into that trap of avarice.
What are the consequences of that avarice, according to James and the source's interpretation?
Well, James speaks vividly of wealth rotting, of gold and silver corroding, and importantly, the cries of exploited workers reaching God. The source argues this very exploitation, the rich oppressing the poor, was the spark for huge historical upheavals. The Russian Revolution, the French, the Mexican, all fueled by that dynamic. And it points to modern examples, alleging corruption in places like Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, where it claims ruling elites get rich while the population suffers.
So avarice leads to exploitation, which leads to societal breakdown.
That's the connection being made. And it also points to a broader societal impact, a rise in narcissism, in egocentrism, people becoming less empathetic, less concerned with the suffering around them because they're so focused on themselves and their own gain.
But the source doesn't end on that bleak note. It brings in a counterpoint, right?
Sure.
About compassion.
Exactly. There's a really touching personal anecdote shared about meeting a Catholic missionary named Gerardo at an airport in Dallas. Despite theological differences, this man, Gerardo, who had 8 children and was making personal sacrifices for his mission trip, insisted on paying for their breakfast. Just a simple act of selfless generosity.
And the takeaway from that encounter.
For the speaker, Dr. Aldusin, it was a moment of realization that God looks at the heart. That genuine spirituality isn't just about correct doctrine, maybe, but about living for others. Selflessness. Mirroring, the source suggests, how Jesus lived, humbling himself, serving, ultimately giving his life. It's presented as the opposite of that self-focused avarice.
So we've covered a lot today, a really deep dive, tracing these ideas from ancient prophecies through the source's interpretation, connecting them to modern commerce, geopolitics, ethics. It paints a picture, based on Dr. Aldusin's message, where Babylonian, in both religious and commercial forms, represents this recurring theme of human confusion and corruption, potentially intensifying as history moves forward.
Which really leaves us with a challenging question, doesn't it? For you, listening. In a world that this source describes as increasingly confused, increasingly driven by these powerful commercial interests, how do you find clarity? How do you discern a true path? And maybe more importantly, how do you actively practice compassion in your own sphere of influence?
Yeah, think about that. How do these interpretations, whether you agree with them fully or not, how do they maybe reshape how you see the world moving around you? And could that understanding perhaps prompt you to act differently? To engage in a way that brings perhaps a bit more clarity, a bit more compassion into a world that seems to be searching for answers, something to definitely reflect on.